Hello, Nice Tail here. Wondering if I need to get a new backdrop, which I definitely do because this thing's getting toasted. Today we're going to be reviewing and looking over the Jack Wolf Gunslinger. This was the first locking knife they've done. I don't do slip joints, mostly because I like to have a lock and I'm just not super comfortable with slip joints. But this was the first model that they've done locking. From the original drop. There's been 2 drops of it. So I may actually be able to link a few of them down below if they're still around. But this original version is almost certainly all gone, unfortunately. Let us get right to specs as I fumble and fail and look away and all kinds of things. Blade length, 3 1/4 inches. Handle length, 7 3/8. Or is that was overall? Why do I always do that? Handle length is about 4 1/8. Not a particularly large knife. We'll make the quick comparison here. To the small knife, the Civivi Elementum, and the full-size knife, the Civivi Conspirator. As you can see, much closer to the Elementum. It is a little bit bigger in both blade and handle, though some of that blade is taken up by this transition between the blade and the... What is that called? Ricasso? It's part of the exposed tang that transitions the blade between the functional tang and the blade itself. Other comparisons that might be relevant here, as always with the double-A batteries, or as is now becoming always, because I didn't start out doing this, but I think that's a good idea, having a double-A battery comparison. And the other comparison will be to the Bionic Jack. I wanted to call it the Cyborg, but that's the slip joint variant. As you can see, this is slightly smaller than the Bionic, even with that little arc in it. Though it doesn't look like it on camera, it actually is. The Bionic is a little bit more on the tail and a little bit more on the front end. That's pretty much straight right there, and I'm touching this one, but I'm not quite touching this one. They're all very much in the same general size, but it is not quite as big as some of the recent releases, the Bionic, and I think the Benny's. I think that one's a little bit bigger too. Weight. There is no internal milling on the titanium, but we have a big carbon fiber scales on either side. 2.92 ounces. That is an ounce an inch. Better than an ounce an inch. Good ratios. Not bad ratios on blade to handle either. Though, of course, again, you're trading some of that off. Hardware. That's what I'm looking for. That is the T8. That's not a T8. These are T8. Okay, so the inlay screws are T8. The pivot screw is T9, non-captured, unfortunately. And underneath here, there are 2 sets of screws holding the body together. They are, for some reason, T6. I don't know why. I don't like that, especially when you've went to the lengths of putting T8s on everything, including the lock bar insert. And the clip is screwed in via the butt end right here, internally. But yeah, that baffles me a little bit. T8s everywhere, and then T9 here, but T6 on the body screws. Fortunately, while the outer screws here aren't the deepest tool, the T6s are a little deeper, so I don't think there's going to be too much of an issue with one. But I've also not taken this knife apart. Ah yes, the old 5. Handle thickness, 465 thousandths, so just under half an inch. 116 thousandths of an inch, so about 115 is probably what they're going for. And the hard part on this knife, the ridiculously thin hollow ground blade behind the edge on this knife. I'm going to call that 5 or 6 thousandths behind the edge. It is really hard to tell without going up too far on the blade. Like, really hard. I am fumbling. Yeah, I'm thinking that's like 6 thousandths. It is ridiculously thin. The blade stock's not thick. It is extremely deeply hollow ground. It is a slicing monster. The Jack Wolf knives are performance cutters. No doubt about that. Though I will say that they don't come with all that much bite. This edge is pretty slick. It performs, but I just wonder if that's more due to the fact that it's, you know, super thin than it is super well sharpened piece. See, it performs ridiculously well. I mean, the control is ridiculous. I just shaved off that. But it doesn't feel like it'll definitely cut. It's sharp, but it doesn't feel like it has the most aggressive bite to it. And I have used this, but not a ton. This is... So, I don't know about the sharpening. They're good. They cut, like, ridiculous, but again, it's so thin, it's hard not to. As always, Jack Wolf comes in this with a container. This is not the container to this particular knife. The container to this particular knife has, I don't know where it is. No, I think it's in a box. That's in another box. It's a package in a box in another box, and basically they come with these tubes. You get a little pog that's custom to the knife, coin thing, and cloth that the knife is wrapped in. They all come like this. Different artwork on each one. This one's actually from the Bionic right here, because this one's much more recent. The other one, the sharpshooter, had, as you imagine, a wolf with a rifle on it. And I think it's stored away with a bunch of my other knife boxes. Things that they came in. So it's in a pile. It's going to stay in the pile. Do not disrupt the pile. That is pretty much everything for specs. So, just a quick, what are we looking at? Looking at a clip point, trailing point blade in S90V. Super thin. Super nasty thin. Like, so thin that the camera has trouble focusing on it. Really deep hollow grind. Just crazy. And it's a full hollow grind. I mean, there's a swedge here, but it goes all the way up. I will say that I kind of want them to do... They've done, what, one other blade shape in the Midnight Jack, I believe it is, where it's sort of a sheep's foot. Actually, I think that's technically considered a ram's foot. Fun fact, sheep's foot is when it goes out parallel and drops down. Lamb's foot is when it drops down, when the spine goes lower and drops into the sheep's foot. And a lamb's foot is that, and and a ram's foot is when it goes slightly up. The spine is obtuse angle and drops in. Supposedly, that's what I've heard. I do wish they would do a couple other blade shapes, like this knife especially, this being this shape of the handle. I wanted this one to be a different blade shape. I was hoping for like a Tonto or something more modern that really accentuated that, but we're going for just keeping the traditional sort of blade shapes. And the traditional sort of blade shapes are there to, I guess, accentuate the traditional sort of styling. This very much looks like a bolstered slip joint, except it's a locking knife with a clip. And it looks like a slip joint because there are typically slip joint variants of pretty much most of the patterns. Nail neck, that can also be used for the reverse flick for the deployment. I haven't... Oh, well, son of a bitch. Alright, between the transition from the grind to the actual flat of the tang and that little bit of the hole there, that's actually surprisingly easy to thumb flick out, which is honestly something I'd never even tried before. On this one. Is this one? Yeah, you can do it. Okay, holy crap. I'm finding out something new right now. Otherwise, front flipper. The jimping is a bit wide for my taste. It's not the perfect jimping for a front flipper, but if you come at it from the side, it'll wear away on your finger real quick. But if you come at it from the front, it works well. It's just, I wouldn't want to fidget with that knife on the side because it is a bit sharp. Because it's so wide, it has to be sharp to give you the grip. That said, all of the old... This is what I don't like doing because I have to run my finger on it, but... Yeah, you see that? That one's a little bit sharp for that one. Not super comfortable. This knife is centered. There is no play. I have not had any play with any Jack Wolf knife. I have not had any QC issues with any Jack Wolf knife. In fact, they're extremely consistent. They feel very, very good and very consistent. Though I will admit this one doesn't ting quite the same. Probably due to the titanium scales on that one. This one, you sort of get a ring to it. There you go. Hopefully it caught up. Oh, hopefully the mic caught that. Very simple, very minimal, traditional, elegant look. The carbon fiber on this particular one is toxic green, which I actually really like. I like green carbon fiber. And this is particularly attractive. There's a lot of green, but it's all just sort of highlighting around the differentials between the blacks, which is really good looking in my opinion. Full body backspacer. They almost always do that. In fact, I think they always do. Nice pocket clip. Very small. Very minimal. It's a little sharp, but you don't feel that in hand at all. It's only right here on the tip. Everything else is super chamfered. And even here on the tip, honestly, it's rounded enough that I wouldn't call that sharp. And it's so small, so flat in the hand. It just disappears. It does. I mean, if I'm really looking for it, I can kind of feel it there, but it's not uncomfortable in the slightest. It's a great clip. Simple clip. And even though it's not that tall, this one has a little bit more flat on the end. I'm not the big fan of that, but even though it's not that tall, it works. It can be a little tight if you're going into super thick jeans because, let's be honest, you're not getting super thick jeans down in there. So this one has a slightly taller clip. You probably could on that one. Not so much this one. So if you want to carry it in that sense, you do have some restrictions for the clip. I suppose you can always get a, whatchamacallit, where is it? Something like a pocket sheath that you just slip it in. This is not for that knife, but yeah, that works pretty darn well. Carbon fiber has no voids. It is now fuzzy from the slip, because that's a brand new slip. I don't have any reason to use that. Lock bar insert. And the final thing I want to talk about is access. Lock bar access is not great on these. So if that's a pet peeve, maybe you don't want to think about this. But none of the Jack Wolf knives, they're designed clearly to maintain that minimal aesthetic. So the lock bars, while they are bold, chamfered down, and they're not super hard to get to, you're not coming from the side. There's no access on the side. You're coming from the front, and really, okay. You're really just coming from the front. It doesn't bother me because it's in service of everything else. But on a normal knife, I do like to see a little bit more access. This is, I guess they're just saying, it works, so form takes priority here, which is understandable. It's super clean. I think that's pretty much everything to talk about. It's on bearings. The stop pin is up in here, caged down inside the, right near the pivot. So, choil, though you're probably not going to have to cut in any sort of choil because the plunge grind ends way up here, and they gave you this big old notch in it. So that's like how you do a choil, let's be honest. That gives you tons of life to sharpen off this knife. And if you somehow get it up that far and are still using this knife, and it's still thin enough that you can keep using this knife, let's be honest. It's probably not going to get too thick until like way up here. It's so deep. Yeah, it's endless life. This is sort of it's not sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? A legacy heirloom knife in the same sense as something like a Chris Reeve or the Imamba I did, where it's those just such extreme precision tolerances and just unique, almost custom feel. It's not that, but in a lot of ways, this could be a long time use heirloom knife. I mean, it's very attractive. It's timeless style. You got ridiculous life on this thing. Super thin, and you're not even going to go up this thing fast because of how small those bevels are. I mean, as always, I wish companies would tell us what degrees per side they're sharpening to. Especially on a knife like this where it's going to be ridiculously hard for me to try and figure that out. It's like, okay, what degrees per side is this on this tiny little freaking edge bevel? I don't know. Let's assume that it's probably something like 20, around that. That's probably what most companies are doing. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think they typically go too far under that. I personally like around 17 to 18 degrees. So that's not bad, and I'd probably sharpen this thing at that. So even if the edge bevel got a tiny bit bigger, it's so thin it's not going to get giant real fast, but on some knives it could. So I wish they'd let us know. Other than that, that's all I have to say about this knife. This is a great knife. These things came in both times, I think, around $350. Different handle materials, wood, carbon fibers, in this case, crystallized titanium, though I don't know if how many of these are still around. I'll try and link it. But other than that, if you're looking for a slicing, comfortable knife, I didn't even talk about the gun stock, hence the Gunslinger Jack. Traditional handle shape. You get a little bit more to grip onto here and a little bit of an indent here. It's super comfortable in hand, super neutral. Yeah, everything's good on these. They're really good knives, and they're definitely something that if you're just looking for a really good performance knife, you don't mind the front flipper, these are definitely up there. They are on the expensive side at $350, but you're definitely getting the extra fit and finish and quality and execution on these things. But overall, I want to see them put T8s on the body, internal, the actual body screws, and I don't want to capture, and I want captured pivots. It just makes things easier. That said, I will admit, I think I have unscrewed this one, and I had no problem with the pivot whatsoever. I was able to do it from one side. Now, depending on Loctite and stuff that they put in there, that could be different per knife, but this one's a little bit more drop shot. This one's a little tighter. In fact, it's quite tight. It's not drop shot at all. It's consistent and it rolls, but I will say that these were tight. This was, like I said, the first design they did in locking, so sort of an experiment. I actually don't mind it being this way. I kind of like that you have to be a little more deliberate with the close on this knife, like you would a slip joint. It's certainly not hard, but there is something to be said that you gotta be able to appreciate that too. Either way, the Gunslinger Jack is a really fun knife, and I think keeping an eye on Jack Wolf knives is a good thing, because if a pen comes out that really speaks to you, I think you could probably reliably pull the trigger on it and get your money's worth. That's all from me. I'll see you guys in the next one.